Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. The Woman on the Upper Deck, passenger steamship, North Atlantic, circa 1905. At first glance, it is an ordinary travel photograph. A woman stands alone on the upper deck, dressed in white, her posture careful and composed, as if she has been asked to remain still for a long exposure. The ship behind her is solid and real. Metal railings, cabin windows, the geometry of travel and progress. Nothing here suggests fear. But then the eye lingers. To her left, near the cabin wall, a second shape appears. Tall, narrow, and pale. It has no clear face, no defined clothing, only the faint suggestion of a human outline, as if someone stood there briefly and then reconsidered being seen. The longer you look, the less it feels like smoke or light. Passenger records from this era note that women often traveled alone after funerals, escorting personal belongings across the Atlantic. Some never returned the same way. If the camera truly captured only what stood before it, then this photograph raises a quiet question. Was she alone on that deck? Or simply the only one still solid enough to be remembered? The face behind the cookware. Rural European kitchen, circa 1910. At first, this photograph looks like a simple record of a working kitchen. Pots hang from nails, pans are stacked with care, and every surface shows the quiet discipline of daily use. It is the kind of room where meals were prepared without recipes, guided by memory and habit rather than instruction. Then the eyes adjust. On the shelf above the stone sink, between metal bowls and cookware, a pale shape appears. It does not belong to the objects around it. There is a suggestion of a face, soft features, hollow eyes, and a mouth that does not quite form an expression. It seems to look outward, not at the kitchen, but through it. Early photography often required long exposures, and kitchens were rarely empty. Servants, widows, or elderly family members would move through the frame, pausing without realizing they were being recorded. Some never moved on from the rooms they knew best. If this is only a trick of light, it is an unusually patient one. And if it is not, then this kitchen was never as empty as it appeared, only quietly occupied by someone who refused to leave. The Child Carried Home, Montmartre Courtyard, Paris, circa 1912. At first, the photograph feels unremarkable. A narrow cobbled courtyard, worn of buildings leaning inward, laundry windows half open to air that smells of stone and damp leaves. A man stands in the foreground, holding a child wrapped carefully in his arms. It looks like an everyday moment, perhaps a father bringing his son home before supper. But the longer you look, the more unsettled the scene becomes. Behind him, near the base of the wall and just beyond the tree, a pale vertical shape lingers. It is not aligned with any doorway or shadow. It has no clear edge, yet it stands upright, as if pausing mid-step. Too tall to be a child, too narrow to be a wall stain. It resembles someone waiting. In early 20th century Paris, childhood illness was common, and many courtyards like this witnessed quiet, unrecorded losses. Some families returned home carrying more than they left with. If the man sensed anything behind him, he did not turn. Perhaps he already knew. Or perhaps whatever followed them had walked that courtyard many times before and never quite learned how to leave. The Woman Who Waited by the Cart, Italian street vendor, circa 1908. At first, the photograph feels almost cheerful. A street vendor stands beside his cart, neatly dressed, his posture relaxed as if the photographer caught him between customers. The bicycle rests nearby, flowers and goods arranged with care. It is a picture of routine. Work paused for a moment, life briefly held still. Then the background begins to speak. To the right of the frame, near the wall, a woman appears. She is faint, translucent, her form barely held together by the light. Her face is visible, though softened, as if seen through fog or memory. She is not interacting with the vendor. She is simply standing there, waiting. Street photography in the early 1900s required patience. Long exposures often recorded more than the photographer intended. Passers-by who stopped too long, figures who lingered just enough to leave a trace. Yet this woman seems too complete to be a blur, too still to be an accident. Some vendors return to the same spot every day for decades. And sometimes, the people who once stood beside them never truly left. If she was only passing through, why does she feel so rooted to that place? And if she was waiting, who was she hoping would finally see her? The fourth passenger on the lake, Country Estate Boathouse, circa 1903. At first, the photograph feels almost gentle. 3 women sit in a narrow rowing boat, their dresses light, their posture relaxed, as if the afternoon has nowhere else to go. The lake is calm, the trees bare but patient, reflected softly in the water. It is the sort of scene meant to preserve happiness. Then something interrupts the calm. Behind the boat, standing in the water, is a fourth figure. She is faint, almost weightless, her outline dissolving into the surface of the lake. Her dress is darker, older in cut, and she does not touch the boat or the dock. She simply watches. Her feet should not be there. The water should not hold her. Early leisure photographs often hid accidents. Drownings were common in estate lakes, especially before swimming was widely taught. Families returned to the water long before grief had finished with them, believing time would soften the place. The 3 women never look back. Their oars rest easily. Their faces hold no fear. Perhaps the 4th woman is not following them. Perhaps she is staying where she was last seen, waiting for the lake to remember that she never truly let go. The man who didn't leave the stairs. City Tenement, New York, circa 1932. At first, the photograph reads as exhaustion. 2 men sit on the steps of a tenement building, shoulders slumped, faces worn down by years that offered little in return. One smokes in silence. The other leans forward, his head buried in his arms, as if sleep might come simply by wishing hard enough. This was not unusual in the early 1930s. The city was full of men like this, unemployed, displaced, waiting for work that never came. Stairs became places to rest. Doorways became temporary homes. The camera captured hardship without asking permission. But the longer you look, the stranger the scene becomes. The man in the foreground does not appear merely tired. His posture is too fixed, his body too heavy against the railing, as if gravity has claimed him more fully than it should. His face is partly lost to shadow, blurred in a way that suggests he did not, or could not, hold still long enough to be fully recorded. Some residents later spoke of a man who collapsed on those steps during the winter and was not discovered until morning. Life continued around him. People sat nearby. Smoke drifted through the air. If this photograph was taken after that night, then perhaps one of the men never truly stood up again, only remained where he was last too tired to move. The second face in the sun hat. Public garden portrait, circa 1906. At first glance, this appears to be a simple outdoor portrait. A woman stands beneath the trees, wearing a wide sun hat and a high-collared dress, her face tilted slightly upward, as if enjoying the warmth of the day. The light is soft, filtered through leaves, and the moment feels calm, almost intimate. Then another face emerges. Just behind her shoulder, partially blended into her silhouette, is the faint outline of a second person. A child, perhaps. The features are small but distinct. Eyes, nose, mouth, too deliberate to be foliage or shadow. The face looks outward, not at the woman, not at the camera, but somewhere beyond both. Early photographic plates were unforgiving. Long exposures often recorded people who stepped into the frame too late or lingered too long. Yet this face aligns too closely with her body. as if it belongs there, as if the woman is not alone within her own outline. Some portraits from this era were taken after loss. Mothers posed alone, carrying grief so close, it shaped their posture, their breath, their stillness. Children who were gone remained present in ways no one spoke about. If this is only a photographic overlap, it is an unusually tender one. And if it is not, then perhaps the woman did not come to the garden alone, only appeared that way to those who did not know how to look. The seamstress who never looked up. Backstreet Workshop, Paris, circa 1927. At first, the photograph feels quietly industrious. An elderly woman sits at her sewing machine in a narrow alleyway, shoulders bent, hands steady with long practice. Laundry hangs overhead like pale flags, and the walls around her are worn smooth by decades of passing lives. This is work done without spectacle, the kind that keeps a city stitched together. Nothing seems out of place until the eye drifts to the doorway behind her. There, half emerging from the shadowed interior, is a pale shape pressed close to the frame. An arm, perhaps, or the suggestion of one. It does not match the angle of the door or the light of the street. It feels tentative, as if something is leaning forward but stopping short of being seen. Women like her often worked alone, long after family had moved on or died. Neighbors remembered the sound of the machine continuing late into the evening, even when the shutters were closed. Some said she kept sewing clothes for someone who no longer came to collect them. If the figure in the doorway is only a trick of contrast, it is an oddly patient one. And if it is not, then perhaps she was never truly alone in that workshop. Only the last living person who still remembered who the garments were meant for. The prisoner behind the gate. Underground cellar passage, circa 1890. At first, the photograph appears to show nothing more than a narrow brick corridor. Damp with age, its walls darkened by decades of moisture and neglect. Stone steps lead downward to a heavy iron gate, closed tight, sealing off whatever lies beyond. It feels like a place built to keep things in and to keep people out. Then the figure becomes visible. Behind the bars stands a human shape, pale and indistinct, as if formed from mist rather than flesh. The outline is upright, facing forward, with a faint suggestion of shoulders and a head. There is no movement, no gesture of escape, only waiting. The gate does not cast the figure's shape. The light does not explain it. In the late 19th century, underground chambers like this were often used for short-term confinement, storage, or punishment. Records were poorly kept. Some prisoners were forgotten, especially during outbreaks of disease or periods of unrest. Doors were locked, and time did the rest. If this is merely a blur caused by long exposure, it is a strangely obedient one, standing exactly where a person would. And if it is not, then perhaps the cell was never truly empty, only occupied by someone who remained long after the key stopped turning. The guest who wasn't invited. Living room celebration, circa 1956. At first, the photograph feels warm and ordinary. 5 friends stand close together, arms draped over shoulders, smiling into the camera at the end of a long night. The table in front of them is cluttered with glasses, crumbs, and party favors. Evidence of laughter, music, and conversations that probably went on too late. It is the kind of picture meant to remember happiness. Then the lower half of the image asks to be seen. Between the group, just beneath the woman in the center, a small figure appears. A child's head and shoulders rise into view, blurred but unmistakably human. The face is expressionless, the eyes dark, the body oddly cut off at the chest, as if the rest of them never fully arrived. None of the adults are looking down, none of them seem to notice. In the 1950s, family gatherings often took place in cramped apartments, where children wandered in and out of photographs without warning. Long exposures could catch them half present. But this figure feels too still, too centered, too quietly placed to be accidental. If this was a child who moved too late, why does no one acknowledge them? And if it wasn't, then perhaps the group wasn't as complete as they believed. Smiling alongside someone who had already learned how to remain unseen. The one who sat through dinner, family dining room, Eastern Europe, circa 1904. At first, the photograph feels formal and composed. A family sits around a heavy dining table, faces arranged carefully, hands folded or resting near plates and cups. The room is orderly. Paneled walls, framed pictures, a lamp standing like a quiet witness. This is a moment meant to last, preserved with intention. Then the air between them begins to blur. Across the table, several figures appear faint, as if their outlines were softened after the shutter closed. One face, near the center, seems less solid than the others. Features slightly misaligned, eyes dimmer, posture fixed in a way that suggests patience rather than presence. The chair is occupied, yet something about the body feels delayed, like it arrived a second too late to fully belong. Early family portraits often required long exposures. Anyone who moved, breathed too deeply, or hesitated could become half visible. But families also posed after loss, leaving spaces unspoken, chairs filled out of habit rather than hope. No one at the table looks surprised. No one turns away. Perhaps the photograph captured nothing more than a technical flaw. Or perhaps it recorded what the family already knew, that someone still sat with them at dinner, long after their place should have been empty. The man who joined the procession, late, public square, Central Europe, circa 1915. At first, the photograph looks official and orderly. A line of people moves across the square with purpose. Uniforms pressed, hats straight, steps measured. Some appear military, others civilian, all bound together by the seriousness of the moment. A ceremony, perhaps. A farewell. The kind of gathering where silence matters. Nothing seems out of place. Then, near the right edge of the image, the figures begin to lose weight. One man stands apart from the procession, slightly behind the others. His outline is thinner, less certain, as though the light passed through him before it reached the film. His clothing mirrors those around him, but his presence does not. He is facing the same direction, participating in the same moment, yet somehow arriving too late to be fully counted. During the war years, processions like this were common. Funerals blended into farewells. Names were spoken once, then folded into lists. Some men were reported missing for years, neither alive nor officially dead. No one in the photograph turns toward him. No one breaks formation. Perhaps he was simply caught mid-step during a long exposure. Or perhaps the camera recorded something more uncomfortable. That not everyone who followed the procession was meant to be seen, and not everyone who marched had truly returned. The faces that watched the room. Private sitting room, England, circa 1895. At first, the photograph feels carefully arranged. A sitting room preserved in perfect order. Heavy wallpaper, polished furniture, candles placed with intention. Books are stacked neatly, chairs pushed just far enough apart to suggest conversation. It is a room meant to be admired, not lived in. Then the eyes travel upward. 4 framed portraits hang along the wall, evenly spaced, each containing a woman dressed in the fashion of her time. Their expressions are composed, restrained, almost rehearsed. None of them smile. Each looks slightly away from the camera, as if distracted by something happening elsewhere in the room. What unsettles is not the number of portraits, but their similarity. The women appear related, sisters perhaps, or the same woman at different stages of life, preserved again and again while the room below remained unchanged. Victorian households often displayed portraits of the dead alongside the living. Photography had become a way to keep presence after absence, to anchor memory to walls and furniture. Over time, visitors reported the strange sensation of being watched while seated there, even when alone. No mirror hangs among the portraits. No reflection explains the feeling. Perhaps the room was simply a place of remembrance. Or perhaps the faces were not meant to be decorative at all, but vigilant, ensuring that nothing living ever forgot who truly belonged to that room. The elephant who chose the sweets shop. La Ménagerie, 11 rue du Pot de Fer, Paris, circa 1950. At first, it looks like a joke frozen in time. A Parisian street, neat and narrow, and an elephant calmly stepping into a small shop as if this were the most natural errand in the world. The striped awning reads, La Ménagerie, a name that once promised animals to children, not the other way around. The story goes that the elephant had escaped from a nearby circus. No panic, no rampage. Just a slow, deliberate walk through the city, guided less by instinct than by curiosity. When it reached the shop, it did not hesitate. Its massive body filled the doorway, its head disappearing inside, among jars, sweets, and shelves. Never meant to hold something so alive. The photograph later became one of the most famous images in Paris. Part of an album by Robert Doisneau, who understood that the city revealed itself best when it behaved absurdly. For a moment, Paris did not chase the elephant away. It simply watched. And perhaps that is why the image endures. Not because an elephant escaped, but because the city allowed the impossible to feel briefly at home. The corridor that still breathes. Underground stone chamber, Paris, circa unknown. At first, the photograph appears empty. A narrow stone corridor stretches inward, its walls carved by hands that expected the space to outlast them. The air feels heavy even through the image, thick with damp stone and age. Someone has been here recently. There are footprints, scattered debris, a plastic bottle left behind on a ledge. Proof of the living, careless and brief. Then, the center of the frame begins to soften. A vertical haze hangs in the passage, pale and uneven, as if the light itself hesitated before moving forward. It does not cling to the walls. It does not behave like dust or mist. It stands where a person would stand, exactly where the corridor narrows, as if something paused there to listen. Places like this were once used for storage, shelter, confinement, sometimes worse. Records were rarely kept. Names dissolved faster than bodies. Over time, the rooms were sealed, reopened, forgotten again. Nothing in the photograph is moving. And yet it feels unfinished. Perhaps the blur is only a trick of exposure. Or perhaps the corridor remembers being occupied and occasionally exhales just to remind visitors that it was never truly empty. The man who never reached the shore. Pebble Beach, northern coast, circa 1924. At first, the photograph looks playful, even clumsy. A man is caught mid-motion as he climbs out of the water, one leg lifted awkwardly, his body leaning forward as if laughing at his own balance. The sea behind him is restless but ordinary, the horizon flat and unremarkable. It feels like a moment meant to be forgotten, a failed pose, a joke between friends. Then the details settle. His face is blurred beyond expression, not from movement alone, but from something softer, as if the camera struggled to decide whether he was fully there. One foot is planted on the wooden plank, solid and sure. The other seems uncertain, suspended between water and land, between effort and release. And early seaside photographs often involved long exposure times. Waves moved. People didn't always survive the moment between standing and slipping. Along rocky beaches like this, accidents were common, and not all were recorded beyond a brief line in a local paper. The man appears to be climbing out, but the image never confirms that he succeeded. Perhaps this was simply a mistimed photograph. Or perhaps it captured the exact second when the sea had not yet decided whether to let him go, preserving him forever in that narrow space between arriving and being taken back. The van that smelled of morning. Paris Street delivery, circa 1952. At first, the photograph feels reassuring. The back doors of a small delivery van stand open, revealing row upon row of bread. Round loaves stacked tightly above, long baguettes lined below like careful punctuation. It is abundance without excess, order without decoration. This is how mornings began. The street behind the van is quiet. Shops are not yet fully awake. A bicycle leans nearby, waiting for its rider. Nothing suggests urgency. Bread will be delivered. Doors will open. Life will proceed. And yet, the longer you look, the more the van feels strangely sealed. There is no baker in the frame. No hands reaching in. No footprints leading away. The loaves are packed so precisely that it almost seems deliberate, as if the van was filled not for delivery, but for preservation. As if this was the last run, carefully completed, then abandoned. In post-war Paris, bread meant survival. Deliveries were remembered. Missed ones were noticed. Some mornings, vans arrived late. Some never arrived at all. The photograph does not show what happened next. It only shows the bread, waiting patiently inside a vehicle that, for reasons never recorded, did not move on. Perhaps the van was opened again moments later. Or perhaps this image captured a quieter truth, that even the most ordinary rituals can pause suddenly, leaving behind nothing but the proof that someone once intended to come back. The cyclist who wasn't alone. Riverside Promenade, England, circa 1938. At first, the photograph feels light and untroubled. A young woman rides her bicycle along a curved promenade, posture upright, hands steady on the handlebars. The railing guides the path gently forward, trees bare but calm in the background. It is an ordinary afternoon, the sort meant for fresh air and quiet movement. Then the space beside her refuses to stay empty. Just behind the bicycle, a second figure appears. Tall, faint, and unfinished. It has no clear face, no defined clothing, only the suggestion of a person walking at the same pace. The shadow it casts does not quite agree with the light. It lingers too close, as if keeping step. Photographs from this period often required exposures long enough to blur passers-by. But this figure aligns too carefully with her path, occupying the space a companion would naturally take. Close, but not touching, the woman looks ahead, unaware. She does not glance back, she does not slow. Perhaps it is only a stranger caught mid-stride. Or perhaps the image captured something more intimate. That even on a quiet ride, she was accompanied by someone who knew her route by heart and never learned how to fall behind. The seance that didn't end. Private apartment, Europe, circa 1912. At first, the photograph appears intentional. 5 women are arranged carefully in a dimly lit room, dressed in flowing garments meant to suggest ritual rather than fashion. Curtains are drawn. Furniture is pushed aside. This is not a family portrait. It is a gathering with purpose, a moment meant to invite something unseen. Then the stillness begins to fracture. Several faces are blurred beyond recognition, not from carelessness, but from movement that feels uneven, as if some of them shifted while others remained impossibly still. One figure near the floor is barely formed at all, her features dissolving into shadow, her body caught halfway between sitting and vanishing. The woman in front stares directly ahead, eyes heavy, expression resigned rather than frightened. During the early 20th century, seances were not games. They were attempts, often desperate ones, to reach the dead. Participants were warned not to break concentration, not to interrupt, not to leave until everything had been properly dismissed. Nothing in this image suggests closure. Perhaps the blur is only the result of a long exposure. Or perhaps the photograph captured the exact moment when the room became too crowded, when not everyone present was meant to be seen, and not everyone who arrived knew how to leave. The figure on the path. Abandoned farmhouse, southern United States. Dusk. At first, the photograph looks like a mistake. The house in the background is sharp enough. White siding, sagging porch, windows dark with years of neglect. Trees crowd in from every side, their branches knitting together as if trying to hide the place from memory. The light suggests late evening, that hour when nothing feels urgent anymore. Then the foreground refuses to stay empty. A figure stands on the path, blurred beyond recognition. It has the shape of a person, the height, the posture, but no clear features. The body seems to be made of the same colors as the woods around it, as if it borrowed substance from leaves and shadow rather than flesh. The closer it is to the camera, the less solid it becomes. Locals said the house was abandoned after a fire that took only one life. A woman who walked back through the trees each night, looking for something she never managed to carry out. Some claimed she could be seen at dusk, never fully forming, never fully gone. If the blur is just motion, then someone was walking toward the photographer without making a sound. And if it is not, then perhaps the path has learned how to remember those who never stopped coming home. As we reach the end of this journey through forgotten photographs, remember this: these images were never meant to frighten. They were meant to be remembered. Whether what you saw was a trick of light, a flaw of old film, or something that never truly left, the stories remain, quietly watching from the edges of time. If any image made you pause, if any shadow felt too human, or if any face stayed with you longer than it should, tell us in the comments which one disturbed you the most and why. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next journey into the past, where history, memory, and the unexplained still linger in vintage photos. Until next time, look closely. Some things only appear when you do.